Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. As the majordomo of Giant Ghost City, his actions were subject to intense scrutiny. Obviously, his action of taking tens of thousands of soul cultivators out of the city to visit the three great clans with violent intentions had not gone unnoticed. Because of that, news of what had happened in the Kai clan was already the talk of the town shortly after it occurred. Obviously, it wasn't even necessary to mention how quickly rumors spread about the Chen clan. Almost everyone in the city heard the news, and soon, everyone was talking about the fate of the clan chief. Faces flickered in shock and disbelief, and soon, the gossip in the city was raging. What? He forcibly took Mrs. Chen. Hua, this Bai Hao. Who knew that he had such proclivities? He actually took a liking to Chen Shishan's wife. You know, I heard that she's actually a top-rate beauty that has the perfect body for that type of cultivation. You're right, I don't even know what to say. This Bai Hao is far too brazen. Not only did he steal Chen Shishan's wife, he actually went so far as to kill the man. Gossip raged like wildfire. As for some of the more well-informed individuals, they often responded to the shocking news with scornful words and jeering smiles. As word spread, Bai Hao, in addition to being called vicious and merciless, and a reviler of his own family, was now known as someone who took an interest in the wives of others. As would be expected, the Giant Ghost King eventually heard of the matter, and it caused his expression to turn grim. However, the fires of passion burned in his heart, and he turned his gaze in the direction of the Chen clan, an expression of praise in his heart. Of course, Bai Xiaochun provided Mrs. Chen with an escort of cultivators and sent her back to his residence in Giant Ghost City, while he took the remaining tens of thousands of men toward the Bai clan. As they went along, Chen Hai would often cast admiring glances in Bai Xiaochun's direction. When he thought about the unexpected proclivities that had been revealed, he suddenly felt like a new world had been opened up to him. He almost couldn't believe it was possible to be so flagrant and brave. And considering that Majordomo Bai was a powerful person, Chen Hai decided that the best thing to do was spend even more time with him than before. Zhou Yixing prevented any strange expression from appearing on his face, and didn't dare to speak a word about the matter. However, considering that he was a follower of Bai Xiaochun, he decided that in the future, he would take careful note of any other beautiful wives he saw. How could Bai Xiaochun not know what the two of them were thinking? Although he felt more wronged than ever, there was nothing he could do to explain the situation. Sighing with frustration, he kept his gaze fixed on the Bai clan up ahead, his eyes glittering with cold light. Many things had happened since he first arrived in this part of the world. Some of those things he had put behind him, but there was one thing that he could never forget, the sight of an ashen-faced young man underneath a towering tree. Bai Hao, he murmured. Whether it was the diva soul or his overall grudge with the clan, all of it was wrapped up in karma. And the entire time, Bai Xiaochun had hoped to get justice for his apprentice. Now, that time had come. Tens of thousands of beams of light shot through the air toward the Bai clan, radiating a bleak, deadly aura. As for the Bai clan, everyone was on edge, and many people were rushing around frantically. However, things were a bit different than in the Chen or Kai clans. In the Bai clan, the direct bloodline cultivators all knew that they had a life-or-death grudge with Bai Hao. However, not everyone in the clan was part of the direct bloodline. Those members of the auxiliary bloodlines were nervous, but because they had not really participated in the hunt for Bai Hao, weren't as worried. Furthermore, during the rebellion, although the auxiliary bloodlines had participated in storming the city, they hadn't been the ones to try to kill Bai Xiaochun. The direct bloodline had taken the lead in that, and especially the clan chief. Even the clan elders who had attacked Bai Hao had mostly been from the direct bloodline. Because of that, the divide between the direct bloodline and the auxiliary bloodlines was vast and clear. In fact, the direct bloodline cultivators were currently surrounded and isolated by the auxiliary bloodlines, who stared at them with icy glares. The clan chief, Madame Kai, the Grand Elder from the Hall of Corrections, the direct bloodline elders, and nearly 1,000 other clan members all waited with ashen faces and expressions of despair. It wasn't that they didn't wish to flee. It was that, despite how big heaven and earth was, it wasn't big enough to have a place for them to hide. Besides, their enmity with Bai Hao was well known. After the Giant Ghost King returned, and Bai Hao rose to prominence, everyone in the area had been trying to get on Bai Hao's good side. Furthermore, many gazes had been cast in the direction of the Bai clan. After becoming the majordomo, Bai Xiaochun had hinted to many of the powerful organizations in the area that they should pay special attention to the Bai clan. He had essentially sealed off the entire clan, making it impossible for anyone to leave it without making a wild and open attempt at escape. Of course, none of the other groups in the area would have permitted that. Especially considering that the giant ghost king hadn't yet made clear his intentions for the future of the three great clans. If the clan as a whole tried to simply flee, they would definitely have been exterminated. From the outside, the clan seemed unified, but the truth was that they were in fact dramatically divided. And thus, things had dragged on until the current moment. Most importantly of all, the auxiliary bloodline elders and clan members all knew that they would have to give an explanation to Bai Hao about the situation. If the direct bloodline fled, then it was entirely possible that Bai Hao would vent his anger on them. Therefore, for their own safety, they had to make sure that the direct bloodline was around when Bai Hao came. The entire clan was silent. Because of the taciturn attitude of the auxiliary bloodlines, the direct bloodline clan members were trembling, along with many of the servants associated with them. One of them was a young woman who had sneered at Bai Hao the moment he had entered the clan. Another was the old valet who had rebuked him. Everyone who had scorned and humiliated Bai Hao was there. As time ticked by, their despair and hopelessness grew. That was especially true of the clan chief, whose face was ashen and whose heart was filled with bitterness. During the fight near the moat in the city, the detonation of the demigod soul had destroyed half of his body and had nearly shattered his cultivation base. Thanks to some of a secret treasure in the Bai clan's reserve savings, he had recovered. But now, he was simply forced to wait as time passed. Next to him was Madame Kai, her face devoid of blood as she occasionally looked up into the air, her terror interspersed with specks of venomous hatred. Of everyone present, no one hated Bai Hao more than Madame Kai. At the same time, no one felt more terror and despair than her. Never could she have anticipated that even with all the resources of the Bai clan that she had put into her efforts, she would fail in the end. And Bai Hao would actually turn everything around and rise to the heavens. As the Bai clan waited in silence, there was one beautiful young woman in the crowd who had a very complicated expression on her face as she occasionally scanned the skies. She was the fifth young lady. Even she could never have imagined that Bai Hao would one day achieve the things that he had. Also in the crowd was an old man who was apparently viewed as a leader by the clan elders from the auxiliary bloodlines. He was the Grand Elder from the Hall of Justice. He wore a wistful expression as he thought back to the scene of Bai Hao betraying the clan. Eventually, he simply closed his eyes. What a pity, the true Qilin son of the Bai clan. Despite being a powerful Grand Elder, he couldn't go against the orders of the Patriarch. The best he had been able to do was not attack Bai Hao during the fighting. Suddenly, both of the Grand Elders' expressions flickered. Other clan elders reacted similarly, as did the clan chief. People held their breath as a sound like thunder filled the air, and a black cloud covered the sky, radiating killing intent. He's here. It was impossible to say who said it. The entire Bai clan waited nervously, looking up into the black cloud of tens of thousands of soul cultivators. Descending from within that cloud was Bai Xiaochun. Every step he took was like a bolt of lightning that slammed into the hearts of the direct bloodline clan members and left their faces as ashen as death. The clan chief was trembling, and the venomous rage in Madame Kai's eyes was overshadowed only by the terror she felt. I don't like killing people, he said, his growling voice echoing out in all heaven and earth, but sometimes, I have to do it anyway. It doesn't matter if I'm doing it for myself or for others, or whether it's right or wrong. Kill them. Bai Xiaochun pointed in the direction of the Bai clan, not at the auxiliary bloodline members, but at the encircled direct bloodline. His action of pointing his finger was like a crash of thunder. He didn't make a speech. He didn't grandstand. He simply pointed. Chen Hai was at his side like he had been the entire time, and as soon as Bai Xiaochun pointed out, the man's killing intent soared. Carry out the orders of the exalted majordomo. Chen Hai's voice seemed to contain a rain of carnage as he spoke these words. At the same time, he blurred into motion toward the Bai clan. Behind him, tens of thousands of cultivators followed, killing intent raging. Among them were dozens of nascent soul experts, as well as numerous necromancers. It was an entire army of deadly cultivators descending on the Bai clan. Fierce fighting broke out instantly, and although everyone in the clan had been prepared for it, it was still unexpected. Blood began to rain down almost immediately. Bai Hao, you unfilial bastard, the clan chief howled, his eyes bloodshot. The clan chief had never expected that things would play out so simply, that no mercy or compassion would be shown at all. After all, this man was Bai Hao's father. He had originally hoped to try to talk matters out, to admit that he was in the wrong. He had hoped to acknowledge that Bai Hao was a member of the clan, and that for the sake of the clan, they should let bygones be bygones. Of course, from the very beginning, he had also planned to figure out a way to seek revenge later on. But now, all of his plans were pointless. Bai Xiaochun did not waste time. He hoisted the blade, and then chopped it down. Rumbling sounds could be heard as Chen Hai and his men attacked. Screams began to rise up, as well as pleas for mercy. Although they reached Bai Xiaochun's ears, he simply looked up into the sky, an unreadable expression on his face. Were Li Qinghao here to see him, or his elder brother sect leader, they would be shocked. This was a Bai Xiaochun who was very different from the Bai Xiaochun of the past. Although his fundamental personality had not changed, his methods and tactics had most certainly transformed. The auxiliary bloodline members looked on silently. They didn't interfere, nor did they help the direct bloodline. They simply watched. The fifth young lady, the Grand Elder from the Hall of Justice, and everyone else did the same thing. Screams rang out from the direct bloodline clan members. The young servant girl who had scorned Bai Xiaochun was stabbed through the chest with a blade, and died with a look of despair on her face. The old valet also met his end in horror, his eyes blank. All of the people who had scorned Bai Hao were put to death by Chen Hai and his men. They couldn't even fight back. The direct bloodline elders who had chased after Bai Hao outside the clan or attacked him in Giant Ghost City were overwhelmed by despair. A few of them managed to fight back, but then, stained with blood, howled and tried to flee in various directions. Loose arrows. Chen Hai growled with a cold smile. Countless soul cultivators suddenly drew great bows out, and within moments, a cloud of arrows pierced through the air. Then, the fleeing clan elders screamed as they were destroyed in body and soul. Bai Xiaochun didn't watch. Instead, he looked up into the sky, motionless and expressionless. The Grand Elder from the Hall of Corrections died with a bitter smile on his face, cut down by Chen Hai and two other nascent soul experts. Soon, the only person left standing was the clan chief. He looked around at the mountains of corpses, despair filling his face. Then he threw his head back and howled. Throwing all caution to the wind, he transformed into a beam of light that shot directly toward Bai Xiaochun. If I die, I'm taking you with me, you unfilial bastard. As he shot through the air, numerous nascent soul experts moved to intercept him, and soon, fighting broke out in midair. The clan chief fought with utter ferocity, until he was only about 300 meters away from Bai Xiaochun. Soaked in blood, eyes filled with madness, he tried to push forward further, but was then set upon by more nascent soul experts. Rumble. The fighting was fierce, and the clan chief was soon coughing up blood as he glared at Bai Hao, who was standing only 150 meters away. He was trembling, and his life force was almost out. His chest was caved in, and his nascent soul almost destroyed. His eyes were even beginning to fade. He was like a lamp running out of oil, unable to continue fighting, barely able to breathe. And yet, in his madness, he continued to stagger toward Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun slowly looked down from the sky toward the clan chief. Let him come over, he said. The surrounding soul cultivators immediately stayed their hands and stepped back, allowing the clan chief to approach. Oh so slowly, Bai Xiaochun buried the image of the dying Bai Hao into the depths of his heart. Then he focused on the trembling, maddened clan chief. Do you feel any regret at all? Bai Xiaochun asked softly. Bai Hao is also your flesh and blood. Your son. Yes, I regret letting your mother die so quickly. I should have made her die screaming in pain. And I also regret the day you were born. I should have crushed you to death that instant. The clan chief truly had descended into madness, and even began to cackle maniacally. However, as he laughed, the light in his eyes slowly began to fade, until he simply toppled over onto the ground. The chief of the Bai clan was dead. The members of the auxiliary bloodline stood there quietly, their heads bowed, their hearts filled with complex emotions and deep melancholy. The public square in the middle of the clan was filled with corpses at the moment. But there was still one person left alive. She was spattered with blood and shaking physically, and yet filled with the vilest of hatred. Deranged laughter rose up as she struggled to her feet. Your mother was a slut, you son of a bitch. Get over here. Don't you hate me? Why don't you kill me yourself? The only thing I regret is that the people I sent to kill you failed in their task. She actually should have died earlier, but the nascent soul cultivators who took the lead in the slaughter knew that Bai Hao's enmity with Madame Kai was particularly deep. Therefore, they held back, injuring her and leaving her alive for him to deal with. Bai Xiaochun ignored the hysterical Madame Kai, and instead turned to look at Chen Hai. This Madame Kai didn't just send one assassin. She sent many. Get me their names. With that, he took a step forward and vanished into the air. When he reappeared, he was in an abandoned courtyard residence somewhere in the Bai clan. The courtyard was choked with weeds, in the midst of which could be seen numerous children's toys, all of them old and rotting. Also in the courtyard was a well. Bai Xiaochun stood there for a long moment before sighing. As Bai Hao's master, I am acting on his behalf to execute vengeance on you, Madam Kai. He waved his hand, and the weeds in the courtyard vanished. The toys turned into dust. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Having accomplished these things, he left. On his way out of the clan, he looked over at the fifth young lady. Sensing his gaze, she looked up at him, and their eyes met. Fifth elder sister, why don't you act as the clan chiefess from now on? Grand elder, please offer her your support. With a light sigh, the grand elder from the Hall of Justice looked at Bai Xiaochun and nodded. Then he turned and clasped hands respectfully toward the fifth young lady. As for the other surrounding members of the auxiliary bloodline, they slowly began to awaken from the nightmare of blood, whereupon they too clasped hands to the fifth young lady. Of course, Bai Xiaochun took the Bai clan's 1,000 years of reserve savings with him when he returned to Giant Ghost City. Along the way, Chen Hai turned to him and said, "We got the names you asked for. As for Madam Kai, she's dead." Heavenly Marquis Chen, Bai Xiaochun said softly, "Might I trouble you to bring the heads of every name on that list to me within 3 days?" Chen Hai nodded somberly. By the time they returned to the city, word was already beginning to spread that the direct bloodline of the Bai clan had been exterminated. Although it was shocking news, it wasn't entirely unexpected. And of course, it further impressed upon people how vicious and merciless Bai Hao was. The slaughter which had been carried out caused Bai Hao's reputation to grow. A mere look from him would cause people to immediately stop talking. A snort from him was like heavenly thunder that would resound in the hearts of all present. To the powerful organizations in the city, the lost lives of the Bai clan's direct bloodline became a clear reminder of what type of person Majordomo Bai was. He was in the good graces of the king, a powerful official who existed far above everyone else in the realm. Even devas like Duke Deathcrier felt pressure because of him. After all, nobody had done more for the Giant Ghost King than him. After returning to Giant Ghost City, Bai Xiaochun took some time to get his emotions back under control. He didn't like killing, but after everything that had happened to him during his time as Bai Hao, too much frustration and rage had built up inside of him because of the injustice of it all. For Bai Hao's sake, he made the Bai clan pay the price for their past actions. The direct bloodline had been wiped away forever. After he was calm again, he looked at the pile of dazzling items that he had accumulated, and his eyes began to glitter brightly. Although he generally wasn't a greedy person, and wasn't overly attracted to worldly possessions, he was currently looking at the type of wealth that most ordinary people wouldn't be able to accumulate even in 10,000 lifetimes. It was enough to get his heart pounding audibly. Countless vengeful souls, a seemingly endless amounts of soul medicine, a diva soul, innumerable spirit-enhanced magical items. As he examined them all, he gasped constantly. Most moving of all were the secret treasures that had come from the reserve savings of the 3 clans. The Kai clan had its spirit jade statue, but the Chen and Bai clans also had similar items. For example, the Chen clan's secret treasure was a crimson jade bottle, within which was a drop of blood that could supposedly enable any dead soul to recover its memories from its previous life, and become intelligent. Essentially, it could transform a soul into something like a ghost cultivator. In the wildlands, precious materials like that were as rare as phoenix feathers or keelin horns. Originally, the Chen clan had planned to use that drop of blood on their patriarch, after he reached the demigod level and then ran out of longevity. It would enable that patriarch to live on as a ghost cultivator and protect the clan for endless years. Unfortunately, the Chen clan patriarch had been incarcerated after the rebellion, rendering such plans useless. The Bai clan's reserve savings contained a 7-colored lotus seed pod. Originally it had contained 7 lotus seeds, but it now only had 2. Anyone who consumed one of those miraculous seeds would experience a complete recovery from any injuries. In fact, even if one's body were completely shattered, those seeds would return that person to their original state, as if they had been reborn. The reason why the clan chief and the diva patriarch had been able to recover from their serious injuries so quickly was because of those seeds. Any one of these 3 secret treasures would be enough to shake heaven and earth, and went to show how profound the reserve savings of the 3 great clans were. Those 3 clans were definitely way too rich. Bai Xiaochun thought, licking his lips. Next, he picked up a jade slip that contained flame-conjuring formulas from all the clans, everything from 1 to 17-colored flame. Despite scouring all 3 of the clans, though, no formula for 18-colored flame had been recovered. Eventually, Bai Xiaochun came to be convinced that the three great clans didn't have such a formula. Actually, among all of the necromancer clans in the entire wildlands, the formula for 18-colored flame was one of the rarest things imaginable. Whatever. I'll just have to wait for a future opportunity to find the formula. Or, who knows, maybe Bai Xiao's method will eventually produce it. Despite the fact that his pile of treasures didn't contain that formula, he was still very excited overall. I really struck a goldmine this time. I don't think I'll be able to get rid of all this stuff if I tried for my entire life. By this point, he realized that he really enjoyed shaking down rich clans. Compared to shakedowns, cleaning out soul grounds was a virtually pointless activity. If I have a chance in the future, I'll definitely shake down some more clans. He was fully convinced that this was the best route to take. However, moments later, a frown could be seen on his face, and an uneasy feeling rose up in him. Wait a second, there are just simply too many valuable treasures here. If I keep them all for myself, people are definitely going to get jealous. And the giant ghost king probably wouldn't be happy either. Hesitating, he eyed the pile of treasure for a bit before making a decision. Material possessions are nice, but my poor little life is the foundation of everything. Eyes glittering, he thought back to his time on the Great Wall, and what that one particular city magistrate had done. Gradually, his eyes began to shine. Swishing his sleeve, he began to separate out some of the treasures in the pile. 1. He finished his work around evening, whereupon he flew up to the royal palace on the giant ghost statue. Upon arriving, he clasped hands and bowed respectfully, then said in a loud voice, "Bai Xiao is here to seek an audience with His Highness the King." Silence met his request, so he stood there quietly for the time it takes half an incense stick to burn. Then, a solemn voice rang out, "Come in." The time spent waiting had been very nerve-wracking, so at this point, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Heart-thumping, he mused that the giant ghost king really did love to scheme and plot, and then sighed at the memory of being able to slap the man across the side of the head over and over again. Unfortunately, that excitement was something he had to bury deep in his heart. Even if he were 10,000 times more daring than he actually was, he would still never dare to do such a thing again. Settling his thoughts, he put a fawning smile onto his face and then hurried into the grand hall to find the giant ghost king sitting there solemnly on his throne. "You're back?" the king said coolly. "You certainly made quite the scene." He looked neither angry nor pleased, and from the words he spoke, it was impossible to say whether he was offering praise or criticism. Bai Xiaochun was both confused and nervous. Now that the giant ghost king had his cultivation base back, he was completely terrifying. Bai Xiaochun couldn't shake the feeling that if he said even one wrong thing, the man would fly into a rage and have him executed. However, he was fairly certain how to deal with this version of the giant ghost king, and plastered a look of such incredible excitement onto his face that it seemed like he must wish to worship him. "Just as you had predicted, Your Highness, the three great clans were overflowing with wealth. Vengeful souls, soul medicines, magical items, they had too much stuff to count. However, instead of handing them over, they defiantly tried to deceive your humble servant. Unfortunately for them, I had come to visit you beforehand, and thanks to your boundless royal grace, was given plenty of inspiration, and thus saw through their little plot. I even managed to get my hands on the secret treasures in their reserve savings." From the look on his face and the way he worded things, it seemed like he was giving all the credit to the giant ghost king. No expression could be seen on the giant ghost king's face, but there was the faintest hint of irritation in his eyes. Clearly, he was becoming slightly immune to the powers of Bai Xiaochun's flattery, although he still enjoyed it to some degree. "Let's forget about the Chen and Bai clans for the moment," Bai Xiaochun continued. "The Kai clan's secret treasure is just completely shocking. It's a spirit jade statue, 3 meters tall and mysterious to the ultimate degree. It emits light that can surpass the heavens, and has spiritual energy of the rarest type here in the wildlands." As he spoke, he continued to look extremely excited, but also took the time to secretly gauge the giant ghost king's reaction. "As soon as it comes out into the open, the entire area for 3,000 meters in all directions gets filled with incredibly strong spiritual energy. In terms of large-scale use, it could sustain an entire clan, and if used alone, would count as a precious treasure for personal cultivation." Bai Xiaochun's facial expression was extremely lively, and he used compelling gestures to emphasize his words. From the way he described it, the spirit jade statue was obviously something completely one of a kind. Although the giant ghost king had never seen the spirit jade statue, Bai Xiaochun's description made it sound incredible. Yeah, if what you say is true, then that thing really is incredible." However, despite his words, his face remained completely expressionless. Bai Xiaochun had been measuring the giant ghost king up this entire time, and after seeing his current reaction, he decided to take a step forward and lower his voice. Your humble servant has already put the spirit jade statue in one of your side courtyards, sir. Feel free to go study it at any time. At this point, the giant ghost king's eyes widened, and then a broad smile appeared on his face. This was the first time he had ever shown such warmth to Bai Xiaochun. Clearly, he was very pleased with what Bai Xiaochun had done, and even looked at him with open praise. This little hooligan, he thought, really knows what to say and how to say it. Not only is he skilled, he's generous too. On top of that, he knows how to figure out what people are thinking. As of this moment, the giant ghost king's opinion of Bai Xiaochun was only continuing to grow higher. However, at this point he suddenly seemed to remember something, and cleared his throat. Oh right, I heard that the wife of the former clan chief of the Chen clan is supposedly a peerless beauty, as has a physique perfect for cultivation assistance. Before he could finish speaking, Bai Xiaochun, despite cursing inwardly, gave a knowing chuckle. Your Highness, I've already delivered Mrs. Chen to your side courtyard. You can go study her anytime you wish, sir. The giant ghost king immediately slapped his palm down onto the arm of his throne. Eyes widening into a glare, he barked, how impudent. Mrs. Chen is the wife of a former clan chief, and I am one of the 4 heavenly kings, a majestic demigod. How could I do such a thing? If word got out, what do you think it would do to my reputation? Are you stupid, Bai Hao? Get Mrs. Chen out of here this instant. 1. Back in chapter 530, Bai Xiaochun learned a new move from the magistrate of World City. The giant ghost king truly seemed angry, and also extremely disappointed by Bai Xiaochun's failure. From the look on his face, if Bai Xiaochun didn't get Mrs. Chen out of the royal palace immediately, then he would take action and make sure Bai Xiaochun understood what it was like to be punished for making a mistake. Bai Xiaochun was feeling very wronged, and was inwardly cursing the shameless giant ghost king. However, he simply stood there, giving a level look to the giant ghost king, seemingly unmoved by the anger on display. What are you doing just standing there? The giant ghost king roared, slapping his hand down onto his throne again. By now, there was no fawning look on Bai Xiaochun's face, only a pained expression. Sighing, he said, Your Highness, don't worry. The only parties privy to this matter are heaven, earth, you, and me. There isn't a third person in the world who knows the truth. Everyone thinks that I, Bai Hao, took a liking to Mrs. Chen, that I'm the one who swept her away and then killed the clan chief. Furthermore, no one knows that she is in your side courtyard, sir. He sighed again, looking at the giant ghost king as if to say, enough with the act, nobody's fooling anybody here. The giant ghost king's eyes went even wider than before, and yet he was a bit at a loss for words. Originally, he had assumed that Bai Hao would flatter him like he usually did, after which he would eventually pretend to give in. He had never imagined that Bai Xiaochun would be so direct about the matter. Furthermore, the way that Bai Xiaochun put on an air of being wronged caused an embarrassed smile to surface on the giant ghost king's face. The truth was that this Bai Hao really had suffered a blow to his reputation because of the matter, and nobody else in the world knew the truth of the matter. Inside, the giant ghost king was actually feeling wonderful about the whole matter, and as of this moment, his opinion of Bai Hao only continued to climb. Although he was delighted at how the matter had been handled, he continued to glare in disappointment. Finally, he sighed helplessly, shook his head and said, whatever. Just don't do this kind of thing ever again, alright? Bai Xiaochun's face twitched, and he continued to cast a level gaze at the giant ghost king, the expression on his face saying, It's only the 2 of us here, there's no need for the act. The 2 of them stared at each other for a moment, after which the giant ghost king started to feel more guilty. Clearing his throat, he said, the position of majordomo is really just honorary. How about I appoint you as the inspections commissioner of Giant Ghost City? No one will be exempt from investigation, and if you find any indications of rebellion fomenting, you can execute the guilty with impunity. The giant ghost king emphasized his last words with the flick of a sleeve, and a very serious expression. Bai Xiaochun's eyes sparkled in response. The thought of being the inspections commissioner, a person who could investigate anyone he wanted, was very exciting. Bai Xiaochun decided to confirm what he had just heard. What if people offer resistance? The giant ghost king chuckled coldly. Considering everything that had occurred during the rebellion, he actually didn't trust anyone in the city. And that was especially true considering that the 9 Serenities king had been involved. Therefore, he felt little goodwill toward anyone. Waving his hand, he summoned a black spear, which he threw over to Bai Xiaochun. It was like a black bolt of lightning which shot through the air to appear right in front of him. To his shock, as the spear came to a stop in front of him, thrumming loudly, he realized that it had 6 golden designs on it. Mind reeling, and eyes as wide as saucers, he gasped and said, "A 16-fold spirit enhancement. I used that spear a lot in my early days," the giant ghost king said. "Take it as a reward. If anyone causes any problems, use that spear to execute them." The decisiveness in his voice was intense and also somber. As he looked at Bai Xiaochun, he recalled the fact that he hadn't abandoned him despite all of the dangerous situations they faced, and also thought about how there was a powerful magical treasure and a beautiful woman waiting for him in his side courtyard. The right hand of the giant ghost statue used to be the palace of operations for Duke Netherworld. "Let that be your official mansion from now on." Bai Xiaochun's chest heaved with pride, and his eyes sparkled with excitement. The giant ghost king had officially promoted him, given him a precious treasure, and also provided him with a palace of operations. All of that showed that he was indeed very pleased. Radiating health and vigor, he clasped hands and loudly said, "Thank you, Your Highness." Smiling in approval, the giant ghost king offered a few more words of encouragement, then gave a look that indicated that Bai Xiaochun should take his leave. Bai Xiaochun knew how to behave himself when necessary, and could tell that the old pervert was getting antsy. Therefore, he put the spear he had been given into his bag of holding, then clasped hands and prepared to leave. Just when he was about to walk out the door, he stopped and looked back at the king. "Your Highness, you don't happen to have a formula for 18-colored flame, do you, sir?" "A formula for 18-colored flame? I don't. Only the earthly necromancers have that formula. There are 3 of them in all of the wildlands, and they have incredibly high positions. I couldn't take the formula from one of them even if I wanted to." The giant ghost king knew that Bai Hao was a genius when it came to flame conjuring, but what he had just said about the formula for 18-colored flame was completely true. With that, he gave an impatient wave of his hand and then vanished. "Old pervert," Bai Xiaochun cursed inwardly. With that, he left the royal palace and flew in a beam of light to his old residence. Then, he took some of the treasures he had taken from the 3 great clans and gave portions to Chen Hai and Zhou Yixing. He also had them distribute rewards to the tens of thousands of soul cultivators who had helped them deal with the 3 clans. After all, he had long since come to understand the value of rewarding the efforts of the people who worked for you. Chen Hai was very happy, and Zhou Yixing was equally excited. And as the rewards were distributed to the other soul cultivators, their reverence for Bai Xiaochun grew. Having accomplished these things, Bai Xiaochun looked up at the palace of operations on the right hand of the giant ghost statue. For a moment, he hesitated. He had a lot of secrets, and it made him nervous to think about being so close to the giant ghost king himself. But then he stuck his chin up and proudly murmured, "Ah, whatever. It's only a palace of operations. As the majordomo of Giant Ghost City and the inspections commissioner, I can't just have one single residence." With that, he rubbed his bag of holding, within which were more than 10 tongues of 15-colored flame. Those 15-colored flames had all been taken from the 3 great clans. Although I can't concoct 15-colored flame, with these finished flames in hand to study, perhaps I can reverse engineer my way to success. At the very least, I'll be able to cut a lot of time off of my research. Plus, with a 15-colored flame, I can break through from the early nascent soul stage into the mid-stage. That thought got him even more excited. Once he performed another spirit enhancement on his nascent soul, it would definitely cause another huge stir in the wildlands. As if it weren't bad enough that everyone was searching for him. Well, I can't let that fact hold me back from improving my cultivation base. What am I scared of anyway? As the majordomo of Giant Ghost City and the inspections commissioner, I'm the one in charge of looking for Bai Xiaochun. There's nothing at all to fear. If I can't find Bai Xiaochun, then who else could? After going back and forth for a few more minutes, he headed to a secluded meditation chamber. Once inside, he set up some spell formations and also utilized the powers of his mask to make sure he was completely safe. Then he took out his turtle walk, sat down cross-legged, and sent his nascent soul flying out of his body. Then, a 15-colored flame appeared, and golden light flickered. Far away in Arch-Emperor City, on the Hell Emperor Stele, Bai Xiaochun's name was still in first place on the list, with the number 14 next to it. But then, his name began to shine with dazzling light. All of Arch-Emperor City was thrown into another commotion as people looked up in shock to see the number 15 appear next to Bai Xiaochun's name. 15. Bai Xiaochun performed another spirit enhancement on his nascent soul? Is this guy suicidal or something? He just won't give up on toying with his life. What a psycho. I have the feeling that as long as he doesn't get killed, Bai Xiaochun is going to end up being the successor of the Hell Emperor. Quite a few people were making that very prediction. As the city devolved into chaos, Mistress Red Dust was sitting in meditation in the giant ghost legion. When she found out what was happening, she let out a shrill scream. Her hatred for Bai Xiaochun already ran as deep as the depths of the Yellow Springs. Of course, the news flew out of Arch-Emperor City as surely as if it had wings, and the search for Bai Xiaochun grew more frantic. All of the chosen in the wildlands were forced to grit their teeth angrily. It was almost as if they had all been slapped across the face. There in the wildlands, the Hell Emperor Steel had been overtaken by a cultivator from the Heavenspan River. It was really driving them mad. I'm gonna kill this Bai Xiaochun. You better hope I don't find you, Bai Xiaochun, otherwise I'll crush your bones into powder and throw it into the wind. All sorts of curses could be heard throughout the wildlands. Although Bai Xiaochun had no way to know for sure how everyone was reacting, he could guess. His nascent soul's eyes opened, and it flew out of the walk and back into his body. After he carefully inspected it to make sure there were no problems, he breathed a sigh of relief. HMMMPHH. Want to kill me? Why don't you try and find me first? Feeling very pleased with himself, he tested out his cultivation base a bit, and was immediately very excited. His cultivation base was now as boundless as the sea. He was in the mid-nascent soul stage, far beyond his previous level. In fact, he suddenly felt the impulse to go find someone half a step into the Diva realm to fight with. It's too bad I still don't have a way to cultivate my undying bones. Although he was happy to have improved his cultivation base again, the mere thought of his undying bones got him depressed. Although he had acquired plenty of treasure from the 3 great clans, he hadn't found any objects that could provide abundant life force. That left him sighing with regret at the fact that he hadn't used his eternal parasol on the giant ghost king back when he'd had the chance. That would have at least given him a bit of life force to work with. What a pity. Well, time and tide wait for no man. Sighing, he drove such dangerous thoughts from his mind. After all, if the giant ghost king ever found out he had thought such things, he would probably skin him alive. For now, I'll have to forget about my undying bones. The most important thing right now is my research into 15-colored flame. Obviously, the best way to keep improving his cultivation base was by working hard with multicolored flame. Up to now, he had already done plenty of research into 15-colored flame, but there were still many aspects of the formula that he didn't understand. Taking a deep breath, he produced a tongue of 15-colored flame from his bag of holding, then began to study it closely. Soon, the glow of augury could be seen in his eyes as he began to analyze it from all angles. Studying an actual 15-colored flame in this way would make him much more proficient in using it, and would be a reference point that would make future work much smoother. 3 days passed by in a flash. Bai Xiaochun remained immersed in researching 15-colored flame, and on numerous occasions, his eyes flickered with delight and anticipation. Although 3 days was a short time, because of his augury method, he actually made significant progress. Eventually, he sent the flame spreading out to look at it in a different state, and then even went so far as to intentionally destroy it. When all of the 15 different types of flame appeared, he compared the familiar 14 colors with the unfamiliar 15th. Based on what he already knew, that gave him significant further enlightenment. When evening fell on the 3rd day, he took a deep breath and looked at the destroyed 15-colored flame for a long moment, then closed his eyes. After an hour passed, his eyes opened, and they glowed brightly. He quickly pulled out another 15-colored flame to continue studying, when all of a sudden, he turned his attention outside of the secluded meditation chamber. 3 days have passed, he murmured. With that, he emerged out in the open and waited in the courtyard, looking up into the sky. Before long, a beam of light appeared, within which was Chen Hai. "Bai, my boy," he said, laughing heartily. After landing in front of Bai Xiaochun, he clasped hands and bowed, a broad smile on his face. "Chen, old pal," Bai Xiaochun said, stepping forward to pull him up from his bow. "Bai, my boy, the mission was accomplished smoothly. All of the things you asked me to get for you are right here." With that, he produced a bag of holding, which he handed out to Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun looked at it, and was already starting to pant. Eyes flashing with cold light, he clasped hands to Chen Hai, took the bag, and then chatted for a few more minutes. Eventually, Chen Hai left. At that point, Bai Xiaochun went back into his secluded meditation chamber and sat down cross-legged. Inside of the bag of holding were 9 human heads. They were the 9 assassins that Madame Kai had identified when being interrogated. None of them were from the Bai clan, they had all been employed directly by Madame Kai. Regardless of their identity or standing, they were now nothing more than bodiless heads. All of a sudden, Bai Xiaochun found himself thinking of that moment when he had first arrived in the wildlands, and had actually glimpsed Bai Hao in the flesh, still alive. A moment passed, and he waved his hand, transforming the 9 severed heads into nothing more than ash. Bai Hao, my apprentice, he said softly, I have avenged your death. Even though I'm still using your identity, I think that your spirit can now rest in peace. At this point, he finally let out a long sigh. The direct bloodline had been put to death, and all of the killers were now nothing more than ash. As of this point, all of the karma was completely and utterly resolved. Bai Xiaochun took a bit of time to calm himself again, then pulled out another tongue of 15-colored flame and began to perform auguries. More time passed. An entire month flew by, during which time Bai Xiaochun immersed himself in his study and auguries regarding 15-colored flame. He never came out of secluded meditation, and yet, his fame continued to grow in Giant Ghost City. The talk about the things which had occurred with the 3 great clans was beginning to die down a bit, but the reverence people felt toward Bai Xiaochun only grew. And then there was the announcement that the Giant Ghost King had appointed Bai Hao to be the inspections commissioner, and had even gifted him with a treasured spear and an official palace of operations, and his name grew even more powerful and famous. As Bai Xiaochun grew more powerful and respected, the various groups and organizations within the city began to quiet down. The crisis period for Giant Ghost City had passed, and things were really starting to get back to normal. However, no one could ever have anticipated that, just when Giant Ghost City was getting back to normal, one afternoon, a very shocking incident occurred 500,000 kilometers away. It was a vast, 50,000-kilometer area covered with dense fog, a muddy marsh that wasn't even inhabited by wild animals. Because of the lack of any sort of living beings, it was a location of death and lifelessness. The fog never lifted from the area no matter the time of year, which made it very difficult for anyone to see in. Because of the intense aura of death, and the vile miasma that was dangerous even to nascent soul cultivators, few people ever entered the place for long. If they did, they would surely die. It had long since become a forbidden region that no one entered. Any soul cultivator who found the place in their way would always skirt around it. However, any almighty being who could look down on the place from above would notice that there was actually a structure within the swirling fog. It looked like a gigantic tea kettle. 1. The area around the tea kettle swarmed with souls. However, they were different than the vengeful souls usually seen in the wildlands. Their eyes were bright red, and they seemed particularly violent. They even had horns sticking out of their foreheads, making them look like evil ghosts. However, the violent, evil ghosts only existed directly around the tea kettle, and didn't fly out into the fog beyond. Apparently, unless they were provoked, they wouldn't actually cause harm. This location was one of the arcane pocket realms belonging to the Imperial clan. It was the Necromancer Kettle. No investigation or research had ever confirmed the origin of the Necromancer Kettle, or the reason why it bore the semblance of a tea kettle. The only thing that was known was that the good fortune inside of it belonged exclusively to the Imperial clan. The fog around the kettle formed a year-round seal that was only opened on occasion. However, on this day, the entire Necromancer Kettle began to tremble unexpectedly, and the lands around it started quaking violently. Thunderous rumbles filled the air, and the fog began to seethe and slowly rise off of the ground. At that point, high in the sky above the Necromancer Kettle, a bizarre, black flower appeared. The black flower had 5 petals, each of which resembled the face of a ghost. As the flower bloomed, the fog swirled around it and also turned into the shape of a ghost face. It was a very shocking sight to behold. The first person to notice the sudden change was none other than the Giant Ghost King in Giant Ghost City. Moments before, he had been sitting in his royal palace listening to Duke Deathcrier report on some matters relating to 9 Serenities City. His eyes had been flickering with cold light, and he had been about to ask a question when, all of a sudden, his face fell, and he looked off into the distance. The Ghost King Orchid, he said, his aura fluctuating wildly. Duke Deathcrier's eyes went wide as the Giant Ghost King suddenly vanished, to appear high in the sky above the city. There, he began to move as quickly as a lightning bolt, to appear in the area near the Necromancer Kettle. When he saw the black flower floating in the sky, his eyes began to shine brightly. He cast a glance at the Necromancer Kettle, and then turned and vanished again, to reappear back in his royal palace. After dismissing Duke Deathcrier, he closed his eyes thoughtfully for a long moment, then turned to look in the direction of Archemperor City. It was in that very city, far, far away from Giant Ghost City, that, in a certain grand hall in the Imperial Palace, 8 ancient and crumbling bones had been enshrined. Suddenly, one of those crumbling pieces of bone began to belch out black mist, which quickly took the shape of a flower identical to the one above the necromancer kettle. Several old cultivators who acted as guards outside of that particular hall had sensed the change and rushed inside. When they saw the black flower coming out of the crumbling bone, they were shocked to the core. The Ghost King Orchid is blooming. After exchanging glances, the old men took out jade slips to notify the Grand Heaven Master. The Grand Heaven Master was currently in Arch-Emperor City's Heaven Master Hall. When he got the news, he opened his eyes and looked off into the distance toward the necromancer kettle. The necromancer kettle is active, and the Ghost King Orchid is blooming. One of the 8 arcane pocket realms has opened. That flower is of particular importance to the giant Ghost King. Suddenly, he heard a voice from outside. Heaven Master, Goddess Red Dust is here requesting an audience. The Grand Heaven Master's eyes flickered, and then he said, send her away. Make an announcement that the Ghost King Orchid will be available to whoever destiny sees fit. After the Grand Heaven Master's announcement, news about the blooming of the Ghost King Orchid quickly spread through Arch-Emperor City. Meanwhile, back in Giant Ghost City, Bai Xiaochun had just gone through his 6th 15-colored flame. However, his level of control was improving, and it was at this point that he excitedly took out a soul-hoarding pagoda. Moments later, a vast horde of vengeful souls flew out into the open, and Bai Xiaochun began to work on conjuring a 15-colored flame. 1. This tea kettle is obviously a Chinese-style kettle, which would look something like this. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.